people need to know that there are organizations that are out there that can support. We are here to support kiddos. We are here to support their families, and we want to do just that.
We know a healthy adult-child relationship is one of the most protective factors there are.
The gift of storytelling. Now, how do you tell your story? How do you tell it with data? How do you create data points in your own life? And how do you see the trajectory of your life? So look into the future and imagine. To lean into this is what it takes.
Welcome back to the Impact Lounge and to our new series from SixDegrees.org, Mental Health Conversations That Connect Us. I'm your host, Stacy Huston, and we're honored to bring this series as part of our national #IGetIt campaign. This movement is all about amplifying the depth of the mental health sector, normalizing tough conversations, and giving people practical tools to support one another. Every Wednesday in May, we're featuring inspiring leaders from music, mental health, caregiving, and lived experiences. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in relationship. So let's take a deep breath, settle in, grab a coffee, and welcome to today's conversation. Today's episode is called Families, Foundations, and Finding Strength. We're shining a light on the powerful resilience found within families and the innovative systems that surround them. From grief to trauma recovery, today's panelists are creating compassionate, evidence-based, and culturally relevant programs to support mental health, wellness for children and families nationwide. So let's meet them. First up, we'd like to welcome Brie Overton, the Chief Clinical Officer at Experience Camps, a licensed professional counselor who specializes in grief and helps grieving children heal through compassion, play, and safe connection. Welcome to the show, Brie.
Thank you, Stacy. It's great to be here.
Next up, we have Dr. Ariana Hoet, Executive Clinical Director at Kids Mental Health Foundation, a pediatric psychologist and national mental health advocate, leading efforts to reach all children, especially those in underrepresented communities. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hoet.
Thanks for having me.
And then last but not least, we have Dr. Brook Bello, founder and CEO of More to Life, an award-winning author, tech founder, and survivor building trauma-informed programs that prevent trafficking and support recovery. Welcome, Dr. Bello.
Thank you, Stacy and 6 Degrees for having us.
Let's begin where many stories of resilience actually begin, and that's with understanding grief and trauma and the strength that actually can rise from that. The question that we want to start with is, how does your organization support families through these kind of complex dealings, right? And I'd like to start with Brie specifically, and give you some time while you answer the question to talk a little about experience camps, because I think it's a really beautiful model, and I'm sure our listeners are going to want to learn more. But your work is grounded in helping children that are processing loss in a really safe, playful, and connected way through these spaces. And so what does support look like in action for you? And tell us a little bit about experience camps.
I will. I am very happy to talk about experience camps. We are experience camps. We support kiddos who have experienced the death of a parent, sibling, or primary caregiver through no cost, week-long overnight camps throughout the summer. And so every single one of our kids that come to camp have experienced the death of someone close to them, someone significant in their lives. Um, and we do that again by supporting them through camp. And we also have different opportunities throughout the year where we connect our kiddos. I call them kiddos, our campers, with the other campers from their bunks, other campers across our camps. Um, and we started doing family camps. So we are now supporting the family as a whole. So our kiddos can come to the camp in the summer, and then we have these family camp opportunities throughout the year as well, where we encourage the family to come and to connect with other families, but also really connect with their family unit. How has this grief impacted us? How has this death impacted our lives? And we do different clinical activities that allow them to explore and express their grief in a very safe space. So they're exploring their grief with each other as a family, also connecting with other families. And then when their kiddos come to camp, they get it, right? They are with other kids who know what it feels like to have experienced the death of a parent, or to have experienced the death of a sibling. And they're not the only ones. So we're normalizing that, grief is this natural process in life. And we want to be able to help equip our kiddos with tools that they need at camp to really process through that, but also to really be able to process outside of camp. When they go home after that year, I'm sorry, after that week at camp, they go home for the rest of the year. And our hope is that we're planting these seeds and these nuggets that will allow them to share some of those tools that they have acquired at camp, or some of the new ways to cope at camp from the other kids, but also just, from the adults that are there as well.
Thank you so much. As a mom of two little ones, they're only 3 and 5. I can share that they are so quick to take what they've learned
Mhm.
and to teach it to a friend or to the other sister, that I can imagine how powerful it is to take a tool like that and to show up for another person in their life, maybe at a different time, that
Yes.
needs to access something that they can now support them in. So,
Mhm.
really beautiful moments up ahead for the young people that you're working with. So thank you for
Definitely.
sharing.
Of course.
Um, I'd love to ask you, Parker, you have taken your own lived experience and turned it into this, sort of roadmap for others. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about More to Life, share the story there, and also how you support healing for both survivors and their families.
Yeah. Wow. I really resonated too with what Brie is doing. So that's wonderful. I think that human developmental trauma is extraordinarily challenging, and it's really what I went through. And when More to Life started, it was because I saw my trauma mirrored in others, but I didn't know how to define it. And when I had my first therapist, it was this idea of teaching me about identity and human development. And it was akin to my brain, because I was trafficked and before that molested and raped. Um, and connecting that to the 33% of America's children, the size of Canada, that go through abuse, and the high percentage of that is sexual in nature. And most kids still don't tell. So you grow with this inside of you and you don't feel safe to share. You think it's your fault. I was no different. And my therapist, was teaching me that human developmental trauma, and I'm talking years ago now, is like your brain developing. It's Imagine trying to build a house in the middle of an earthquake. That was how my brain developed. And so I was just scattered, depressed, filled with anxiety, and I survived suicide. As I began to do better and get well and rescue kids around LA, I said, there's got to be more to life. And went back to school. I first had to get my high school diploma, then my bachelor's, and my master's, and my PhD. And it just led to leaving my career as an actor, which I loved, um, and doing something that I was compelled to do. I didn't choose it. No one should have to choose it with a declining number of therapists, as you all know, in the United States. And so More to Life began to just rescue thousands and thousands of kids. And we saw that the interconnectedness of trauma was that it wasn't just about trafficking, but different forms of exploitation, different forms of violence and abuse were all interconnected. And many of the victims that are trafficked in the States, there's a familial aspect to it. There's a family member that did something before or during. And so when we work with individuals, it's really about finding your voice, working with therapists to kind of discover if there is a diagnosis, what that diagnosis is. And because traditional therapy only has a certain percentile of a success rate. You could go through 7 to 10 therapists before you find the right one. And so you have to find this balance in your own power. And that's difficult. And so we work with the entire family. We found that different types of diagnoses, different types of abuses are generational. And so when we work with siblings, there's a prevention of sexual violence and trafficking, or we discover it. When we work with parents, we find that the mother was a victim of something but never told anybody. We find that the father was. And so we provide therapy through our partners and our own clinicians to the entire family or to the social capital of that individual. We also found that in therapeutic sort of safe houses where victims are, group housing isn't always great. And so we provide independent living and fact teams. You have your therapist, your peer support therapist, survivor mentor, life coach, human development, and a care team around you while you're living on your own and sort of translating out of foster care, and the different things around suicide prevention. And I think that navigating that is what we've done. This is our wow. This will be 21 years as an organization this year.
Wow.
And hopefully, we'll just keep going.
Can I just say thank you so much for being so honest with your story and the hope that it will give to others. And so just we really appreciate you and what you've built and what you continue to build. So
Thank you.
um so I'd love to, look to Ariana. I mean, when families are facing layered challenges, right? Maybe it's grief, systemic barriers, cultural disconnects. How does your organization kind of help guide them through?
Yeah, as both Brie and Dr. Parker mentioned, trauma, stress, grief, it changes a person's trajectory. When we're talking children, it changes their whole life. And so what we do at the Kids Mental Health Foundation is we focus on the adult and how the adult supports that child. We know a healthy adult-child relationship is one of the most protective factors there are. So whether it's a parent, a teacher, a coach, someone in your community, if they have the tools to help you process and navigate, um, that child is more likely to be okay and have better mental health outcomes. So what we do is focus on educating the adults with the skills. It can be something as simple as what questions do I ask? That's what we often people come to us is how do I even start the conversation around this traumatic event? So conversation starters, but then also how do I respond? How do I talk about a tough topic? And then we help with knowing how do I behave as the adult? Something like keeping routines, getting a child back into a routine as much as possible, connecting them with their community. And then knowing what the signs and symptoms are. Not every child that goes through a traumatic event or a stressful event is going to need therapy. And it is normal for a child to have signs and symptoms of that trauma. They're a child, they're a person, they're not a robot. And so, how do I know what's normal? How do I respond to that? And then, how do I know when it's something that I should be connecting them to a mental health professional? And so, really, it's about helping the adult feel that they know what to do, that they're in control as much as they can be in situations like that, so that the child feels protected and like they have someone they can count on.
I think what's interesting there, and you touched on it previously, is this interconnection of families and what is almost passed down, this intergenerational piece there. Um, so when I mean, that's really kind of leads us into that next question I have. Even when help is available, families can still face these obstacles, barriers, right? There's the stigma, as much as we don't want to say, it feels like a broken record, like the stigma around mental health. And every year I feel like it gets better and people are a little bit more open and vulnerable with their stories, which helps break it down. But there is this access from a cultural relevance standpoint that I think is an additional layer. So I'd love to talk a little bit about what you all are seeing as some of the biggest barriers there when it comes specifically to kind of family mental wellness today and how each organization is addressing them. And I can start with you, Ariana. You lead with equity and this, culturally relevant tools. I love following you on social, just the way you show up. But what barriers are you focused on breaking down, currently?
For me, the most important part is the lack of access. And I'm not just talking about treatment, but uh, science based information, right? We know people are turning to social media and the internet when it comes to gathering information about mental health. And we know that's especially true for immigrants, for Black communities. They're really turning to TikTok, Instagram, parenting apps. And so when we do surveys at the Kids Mental Health Foundations and we've asked parents, how important is it to talk about mental health? We hear 93% think it's really important for me to talk about mental health, support my child's mental health, but 40% tell us they know where to start. And so that's what gets me, and that's why I do this work, because the field of psychology, the field of mental health has a lot of the answers. We know a lot of what it takes to protect a child's mental health, but it's stuck in academic journals. It's stuck in academic conferences that are incredibly expensive. They're not accessible. They're in English. And it's just impossible to get that information to communities in that way. So we have to find a different way. Um, and so that's where we come in. That's what we're trying to do at the Kids Mental Health Foundation, is to translate the science, if you will, make it accessible, make it engaging, make it not scary, is what we hear a lot from people. Um, and then we get creative. Okay, we have the resources, but how do we make sure we're reaching people? One of my favorite things that we did a few years back is we partnered with Jenny's Ice Cream. And so we put conversation starters on every table in ice cream stores around the US to get parents or grandparents, whoever it was, to start conversations while eating ice cream with their kids and check in. And so building those daily tools and habits that we know help. And so for me, that's really that would be a dream if the way parents or families know that I need my child to eat their veggies and get their body moving for their physical health, if all the adults knew what it took, those daily habits, for their mental health. And that's what we're aiming for.
That's beautiful. I love that example. What a strong brand partnership, because I mean, young people, all of us really love ice cream. Even friends of mine that are lactose intolerant, they're like, well, just a little bit. I'll take this pill afterwards. But it's a great way to think about how you meet people where they're already going to be, right? I think we'll talk a little bit about I Get It later, but that was really the idea for this campaign. Like, how do we flood the feeds with this positive resources and information, instead of expecting someone to find it on their own or even know what they're looking for at the moment? So I think that's really just a strong way to say, how can we partner and get in front of people in ways that they might already be just living life. So thanks for sharing. Um, I- Parker, I'll move the same question kind of over to you. You know, what do systems miss really when it comes to understanding these layer needs of survivors and their families? I know you already kind of touched on it, right? Like this intergenerational piece, but anything you want to elaborate about in that kind of piece?
Yeah, yeah, and I love what you said. I'm thinking of ice cream right now, but um, Ariana, thank you for that. Socioeconomic stressors. Um, I was raised by a single mom, um, in the inner city, and I think that there's this declining number of therapists in the United States. Maybe there's a little over 500,000, and I think the typical number, if you're going to service, maybe 20 to 30 max sort of clients or so per person. But to meet the challenge we have today, they'd have to meet 90 individuals. It's just not possible. And
Wow.
I think that trauma awareness is really key. Um, and I know you're going to talk about, I think I get it later, but so I'm going to get into that answer. But I think that trauma awareness, most individuals that grow up in stressed and toxic environments that are socially and economically challenged, I call it emotional poverty. It might be a household that is not economically challenged, but socially they've just disconnected, and there's emotional poverty. And I think that when that happens, it's very hard to indicate the pain you feel, to understand it, and to know how to share it. And most people, even today, that, if someone asks a child or ask a friend or ask someone, how are you? Most people don't have time enough to listen to how you're really doing. And so we're all masking. And so one of the barriers is the ability to absolutely want to listen and do peer support and human support, which I like when I was doing in ice cream shops. There's sort of this awareness. But I don't think most people can identify their own trauma. And most individuals just move past it that we've worked with, whether it's a family, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's therapists that we've trained, whether it's all the generational from we've gone like 5 generations within one family. It went back that far. And then it's sort of identifying the ability to forgive yourself for things that were never your fault. And so you have trauma awareness, you have social economic challenges, you have cultural differences. Most therapists are well trained, but the type of training to really deal with the vast sort of variant in cultures within the US requires a deeper dive into understanding who you're talking to and what it's really like for them. That's true empathy. And I think it's lacking and it's difficult to build. It takes time. And in that trauma-informed awareness, a lot of victims of trauma or individuals that are dealing with pain are exhausted and don't realize also that it's not going to happen in 2 sessions or 4 sessions or 8 sessions or 10 sessions. And it may take a year. It may take 1,000 days, we say, which is 3 years. It may take a decade, and it's this undulating process. And you have to be willing to be transparent, and that is very scary. But if more people begin to talk about it and we get out of the silos that technological sort of processes create, and that's a type of loneliness and a disconnect with each other. And so we utilize technology at More to Life and partner with tech as well to really engage and to launch activities that connect everyone so you don't feel siloed. And lastly, I would say that when you have sort of 5 billion people playing games every day, half are women, and half are men that they say, and young boys that do it to connect because they feel lonely in the real world and less lonely in technology, we have a massive challenge. And so this is something that is a barrier to balance mental health as well.
Yeah, no, I can relate so much to that, and this piece about finding uh, seeing yourself in your clinician or someone with lived experience. I think there's that piece that can be really hard when you're already saying, we need to triple the amount essentially of clinicians to fill the need. We're not even talking about those clinicians that might have lived experience that may more closely understand, right? I get it, right? Some of what their client or patient, I should say, is experiencing. So, I appreciate you in that thoughtfulness. Bree, I
Yeah,
mean,
can I jump
oh
into
yes, absolutely.
I really love that Dr. Parker called out that lack of therapists and the lack of therapists that understand your cultural background because we're in a reality, at least in the world for children, but I know that it's the same for adults, that we are never going to have enough therapists. We're definitely not going to have enough therapists to serve um, the community in the US. And so I think that's where these creative solutions have to come in. We have to focus on prevention. How can we work upstream and build a healthy community? But also that's why I love hearing what Brie does, what Dr. Parker does, because how do we build that community? How do we empower other people? And so that, yes, I wish everyone could get therapy, but again, we don't have that capability. So how do we get to a place where um, therapists are there for the people that need it most, and then those with mild symptoms, mild concerns, have a community, have adults around them in the kids case that know what to do, know how to support them, right? We don't take a child to the doctor every time they have a runny nose. We know what to do, or a little cut. Like I know as an adult how to respond. So how can we get to that in the mental health space?
That's so fascinating. When you said kind of the more mild cases back in 2020, I'll just tell one personal story because I feel like it connects the dots on some of what we're talking about. My husband had found this like support group through our primary care doctor that was like dealing with anxiety and just, I mean, COVID was happening. We had a brand new baby. It was just us. So he did this like 6 week, virtual group support class that was really teaching us tools around mindset and helping to kind of reduce some of that anxiety. And he was like, you should do it. And so when I went to go on and sign up, they had this second piece that said, here's the regular group, and then here's a group for people that are a part of like BIPOC communities, right? And I thought, well, I'll do that one, right? And it was my first time being in a group support kind of structure like that, where I was hearing myself and other people and vice versa. And I'm like, it really blew my mind. It was such a wonderful experience. And it makes me think that, yeah, like that's kind of exactly what I needed. Probably didn't need to take the time off of someone's docket for every single week, not at that point in my life, right? And so leaving that space open for someone that is in critical need and there's not enough people, what a thoughtful way to think about how we care for the community, and we use what we need when we need it, and we release what we can release when when we're in a stronger space. So thank you for kind of tying a bow on that. And Bree, over to you. I This idea of young people, especially young people that are losing loved ones, this is really like invisible losses, right? So unless someone is close to this child, they're often walking through life dealing with a great amount of grief, and no one really knows, right, in their day to day. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you guys are supporting these kids and their caregivers who are carrying these invisible losses often.
Sure, yeah. There's a lot of support. We have a lot of built-in support, and so just like, the ladies before me were talking about, I heard connection and awareness and resources. One of the things that we do is normalize. We normalize the grief, right? Those things that our kiddos are feeling, we want to help them acknowledge that that grief is there, acknowledge what these feelings are, and put names to those feelings. And as we educate the kiddos, we're also helping to educate that support system, those families. Two things. We started a digital platform called Grief Sucks. It is a platform for teens and young adults to use, that allows people to connect to stories of grief. Lots of reviews of grief in the media and different things like that. There are blogs there, and it allows our kids to feel less alone and more connected to other people that are connected to some of the same content. Um, and so that's one way that we're helping. Another way is we have 7 locations across the states where our camps are physically located. And in those communities surrounding our camps, we do a great deal of outreach. We want to talk about grief. We want to acknowledge that grief is there, that people feel these feelings. And here's how to cope and work through those. And so we connect with existing agencies and organizations in the community. Yeah, boys and girls clubs and YMCA's and different places like that that are in the communities that are supporting families, and we help support through grief. And so it's helping train the staff and the folks that are supporting the kids and the families. It's going and we do activities that we call PTGs, playing through grief events, where we come in and we bring in camp related activities that allow our kids to really express and explore that grief in the comforts of their backyards or the community centers that they're comfortable with and the people that they know and they feel supported by. And that helps us connect with kiddos, and also helps us talk about camp and helping people feel more comfortable with coming to camp. We talk about access. The ladies before me talked about access. And access is one of those things. Sometimes it could be hard to allow your kiddo to go an hour and a half away or 2 hours away or a plane ride away to camp. Um, and so, how do we connect with existing organizations and families that are in the communities, that are, in need of different resources and in need of grief resources, and really being able to get them connected to the grief that they're feeling and how to support each other and how to work through that together.
That's profound. I love that you have this platform, Grief Sucks, and it's also kind of the language, right? That
Yeah, yeah.
it's made for young people to engage and share, and just a way for them to, find people that are experiencing the same thing to rally around that. Thanks so much for sharing.
Of
One
course.
thing that we've seen really again and again is that when lived experience is really guiding programming, the impact is just going to deepen. And so I'd love to start with you, Parker, if you could share how your own personal journey has fueled your purpose, and really how's that shaped the mission and design. And I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think it's specifically since this was something that has happened and you've been very vocal about that. How do you think that's helped guide those programs and even as you've grown your staff and team?
Yeah, wow. I think it's, in today's world, I think it's difficult to be transparent. Bullying's a thing, and so it's scary to tell your truth, because you just don't know how people might accept you. And everyone mostly wants to have friends, whether you're prepubescent, adolescent, or beyond. Um, Community is something that you build because you have to step out and you have to feel comfortable in your own skin, and it's difficult to do that. And so that was really hard for me. And I think the shaping of the organism of More to Life and um, just moving forward, and for me, I think faith is really important. I don't think that regardless of what you believe, if you believe in something bigger than you, and you have to kind of pull yourself up, whatever that thing is. Some of my friends, their biggest thing is hiking. I'm like, okay, let's go with that. Where are you going to hike next? You're going to climb Mount Everest, but my lived experience, at some point, I just couldn't be dishonest about what I was really feeling and how it was affecting who I am. I wanted to grow. I desired to grow. And so building community around transparency and truth and understand, Les Brown says that the greatest treasures are in the graveyard. And he's right. But also the greatest treasures are inside of people who haven't discovered who they are. And when we discover that, I think there are immense treasures that come from abuse. You learn something if you can get to the other side of pain. And so our program, whether it's mental health processes and housing or counseling, gaming for life, tech for good solutions, digital case management systems, listening to music, binary beats, our system called Coming Home, which launches next year. It's been in beta for 2 years, that gives people sort of in your hand this opportunity to speak and to connect and to understand who you are. Really working with families to find the right housing, the right education, working with employers. We work with Starbucks and Chick-fil-A, to really connect individuals to tell them, well, it's not just autism or a different type of handicap, it's an invisible handicap. And since you're hiring them, there's this cross-pollination of how we feel it can be a win-win for all of us. And so when we're building life enrichment programs for education, for job readiness, for career goals, all of it matters. And I think it started with, me kind of understanding that I'm gonna have to tell the truth, that I'm not doing good today. Or, I've thought, as when I used to, have suicidal ideations, it's a long time ago, I'm way past it. But to be honest about that resonates with people. To be honest, I don't like my face because of what I went through. I hate my body. I don't like the fact that my parents don't have money, or I don't like my clothes, or I don't like that my mother's no longer here, or whatever it is. You're never, ever alone. Everything that's happened to you has probably happened to someone else in a different way, somewhere on the planet. And if we can teach you that, we always say it More to Life, good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best. And then jumping into future goals is best and beyond. Keep going. And I think that storytelling. So now we're teaching storytelling through data. We take it back from Africa, Jewish culture, some American culture, the gift of storytelling. Now, how do you tell your story? How do you tell it with data? How do you create data points in your own life? And how do you see the trajectory of your life? So look into the future and imagine. As Einstein says, we often teach this thing that your imagination is the telling of your future. So what are you thinking? Am I thinking all the day about how much I hurt, or am I trying to get out of that and think about what tomorrow's going to bring, or what later today is going to bring, or how I want to achieve something great? Otherwise, I'm going to wallow in the soot of my pain. And so that's how lived experience utilization of our programs has really worked for us. And I'm just excited that I'm here and I'm 6 feet above ground and I get to keep doing it and helping others. Truly.
And inspire others to do the same with their experiences, which is really what I hear come through and when you share. So thank you for that. And Brie, I'd love to talk a little bit about at experience camps, peer voices and former campers actually play a pretty significant role there. I'd love to talk a little bit about how you model that and why that's important for your work.
Of course. It's that storytelling piece, right? It is there are other people here that get it. They get my story. They get what it is that I'm feeling. They understand what this journey is like. Um, and it may not be the exact same, right? You may not have had the exact same relationship as this person, but you it's similar and you understand it. Um, and so there's this connecting piece with our campers and fellow campers and their peers, but also we invite our campers to come back year after year. So our camp supports kiddos rising fourth grade through rising 12th grade. Um, our campers can come back every summer. They come back as junior counselors to help support. They can come back after that as volunteers. Um, and we are in our 16th year. And so there are campers that have been coming back for years that are volunteers now. Um, and it's about giving back. It's about I remember what it was like being that 5th grader the first time stepping on camp and not knowing what to expect, and being kinda nervous to get off of that bus, but people wrapped me in, right? They welcomed me in, they wanted to hear my story. This for a lot of our campers, this may be the first time that they've ever shared their story, the first time they've ever talked about what it was like for them or the activities or the circumstances around the death, and they get the space to be able to talk freely without judgment, um, and then they're welcomed in with warm embraces, and a lot of peer support, and so our campers are supporting each other, our volunteers are helping support the campers, and then, like I said, those volunteers can come back like, campers come back year after year, can grow into volunteers, and so it's all about growing in their grief together and growing alongside each other, and a lot of our campers will exchange numbers, and then their families will get involved, and so they're connecting throughout the year, um, they come back and they're so excited to see each other, and we get to see how their grief has transformed and how it has changed over the year, and what does it look like to support them now that they're a 7th grader, right? They were a 5th grader, a 6th grader, and now's a 7th grader. How are they viewing their grief differently? What does it look like to be a 7th grader whose dad died when they were 5 years old? What does it look like to be a 12th grader whose dad died when they were 5 years old? And so it's really helping support their grief as they grow, and as they develop. How are they conceptualizing that grief? How are they conceptualizing the impact of that loss? What does that look like for them? And what supports do they need? How can we support them? And of course, how are their peers supporting them? Right. So there's this reciprocation of support as they are moving through this journey together, and it's beautiful and transformative. And I don't say it's beautiful just because I love it. But our kiddos love it. We hear it from our caregivers. It's magic. It's magical, um, the way that they show up for each other. And for a lot of our kiddos, this is the one place where they have that support, and they hold on to that throughout the year until they come back. And it's a beautiful thing to experience and be a part of.
I mean, you paint the picture well. It's I love most that there's a continuum of care and that, as I lost my mom 5 years ago, and what I learned was that, grief is not linear, and I'm fine until, her birthday was this year, and she would have been 70, and it was a really hard week, and it really hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't expect that in any way, but it does, it looks different, and it looks different at milestones for my kids, right? Thinking about her not being here or seeing certain things, and so as a very young person losing a parent, it's the memories that start to fade and those sorts of things that I can imagine are coming up for them. And so to be able to say this isn't a one-time thing, but that you can come back and continue this community, that is just so beautiful. And I think it's such a strong structure in terms of how to shape a program.
Yeah, and one of the things that you just said, it's about um, continuing those connections and those bonds that they have with the person who died. So, right now is graduation season, right? A lot of kiddos are graduating, and you get to that point of where you're like, oh, my mom won't be there, right? My dad won't be at graduation. What will that look like? And so it's helping them think about, what do you want this to look like? How do you want to bring them into the day? And it'll be the same for weddings and the birth of their children, but it's revisiting that grief at different points in life, like those milestones, and those big life experiences where, you assume my person is going to be here and they're going to help support me through that. And when they're not, how do we, how do we, how do we, um, how we process through and make them a part of that memory? And it just looks a little different, right? They won't be there physically, but there are ways that we can incorporate their memory in, that can also be helpful for their growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then I want to kick over kind of the similar question to Ariana, in thinking about lived experience. How are you all bringing community insight and family perspectives into your clinical programming?
So, both personal and professional lived experiences. Personally, I was a child immigrant. I came to the U.S. as a kid, and it was hard. I can look back at the time my parents didn't know this, and this happens all the time in immigrant communities, but I can look back now as like psychologist and say, yes, I had clinical depression at the time. It is what went on. And I was fortunate. It got to a place where my parents said, you either have to go to therapy or you have to do something, join a club. And it's funny that I say as a psychologist that I was like, I'm not doing therapy. Absolutely not. I was this 15-year-old high schooler, like, no way. So I joined the musical. And I found my community. I felt like I belonged all of a sudden. I was, um, started going to the football games and taking in that school culture and finally fitting in. And that's kind of what got me out of it. But working now as a psychologist with immigrant communities, I know that not everyone has that trajectory. And I had a lot of different privileges in my life that also allowed me um, to have, I guess, a lower risk factors. So that all of that, the experiences we have in clinics, not just me, but my colleagues that work at the Kids Mental Health Foundation, our own personal experiences with our communities. And then we talk to communities, whether it's through surveys, through our emails, through social media, and we hear from them. What do you need us to be talking about? What's on your mind? What are your concerns? And that then informs the resources we're creating. Not just the parents, but also the teachers, because we want to surround kids and empower the entire community, the coaches, the after school programs. And that's how we're basing our decisions on what we're talking about.
I like that it's the holistic approach. All of these adults that are touching these young people in different ways and how they show up and the length of time that they're spending with them. I know now with having little kids, I'm like, if I don't pick them up until after 5, they're with me for like 2 hours, I feel like, before it's time for them to go to bed. And that's hard, when you think about that. And so having those dependable adults around them that have these tools are so critical. So I love that. And you all know we couldn't end this without really talking about the campaign that we're so excited that all of your organizations are participating in. It's our campaign called I Get It, because in the hardest moments, that's what we want to hear. That someone else gets it and that we're not alone in this. And that's really been a theme that's coming up in these conversations. So I'll start with anyone that wants to jump in, no necessary order, but what does I Get It mean in the context of, this family caregiving or healing journey for each of you in the work that you do?
Um, well, I love it. I love it because if everyone does something that has reach to say, I get it. Like, I get it. It means you're not alone. I get it. It's so powerful. There's a producer named Joy Gorman Wetzel. She's a friend of mine, and she created the series 13 Reasons Why because her own history, and she got it, what high schoolers were dealing with. Um, I did a talk at, United Talent Agency, and Kathy Olson started Hollywood in Mind a couple years ago just to get Hollywood and United Talent Agency in sharing all about creating films and TV shows and working with entertainers on mental health challenges that are really deep. And um and so I think that I get it, that 6 Degrees is doing that. You have an organization that was founded by an actor, producer, director, and all the other and everyone that you, Stacy, who is extraordinary, to lean into this is is what it takes. And to utilize that reach and that funding to actually care. Um, I think when we can just and such a simple phrase. And it's such I don't know who you guys use for the marketing to come up with it, but I think it's really, really cool. And it's something that you would see. I'm a movie buff because my trauma stole my acting in a way. I stopped doing it, even though I was successful, to do this work, and it took over my life. And and so I still watch movies and I love movies and I inspire people to do their whole dream and to be able to have a campaign that you guys are doing and to be a part of it and to hopefully let it go out to hundreds of thousands of millions of people to say, I get it. We get it. We want you to get it too. It's okay. And you're not alone. There's nothing more powerful than that. That is using the digital medium to build community. And that's really what it's all about.
Well, thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you how it all came to be. So, we have done convener campaigns for a long time, and we believe in collective impact. We always say, like, we're not the experts in any given thing outside of storytelling for impact, but we know how to leverage experts that are doing this work and just need that platform to shine their light a little brighter and cast a wider audience. So I was talking to one of the fellow organizations in this group, Rock Recovery, who works with disordered eating, and she said, "Yeah, we had this campaign. It was, we used hashtag I get it, but like it never picked up." And I was like, "That's a brilliant hashtag, like And she's like, "Well, take it, use it, like if you think that we could do something with that." And I was like, "Yeah, because the key for any of these campaigns is together. We do it together because if we really are going to tackle any cause, anything that we do, we have to do alongside each other and not ever be daft enough to think that we're going to solve anything on our own and we have all the tools and all the resources and because I feel like that's always when ego gets into play, right? When we're like, we've got this. We know the right people but it takes a collective movement. And just like we've talked so effortlessly about this today, there are so many people that hear better when someone has a cultural understanding of where they're coming from. They have a lived experience. And so that alone shows that we need to have cast a wider net in the work that we do. So, thank you for bringing that up. I always wanna make sure and give my roses to, the deserving people that stand alongside us in partnership. Um, who else wants to talk about I Get It and what it means to them?
I will. So we talk a lot of just helping raise awareness about grief. There are lots of grief organizations. There are lots of people supporting. But if there's no awareness, right? If families who are experiencing grief don't know that these organizations exist, um, then it could be hard to raise that awareness. And so we appreciate this. There are 6.5 million, like it's estimated that 6.5 million kiddos before they turn the age of 18 will have experienced the death of a parent, sibling, or primary caregiver in their lives. And so one of the things that we do, I talked about earlier, of just bringing in that digital platform of griefsucks.com is one way that we're helping bridge that gap. Um, but there's so much work to be got to be done. And awareness is key. People need to know that there are organizations that are out there that can support. We are here to support kiddos. We are here to support their families, and we want to do just that. And it's important to also, talk to folks who may not be their experience, right? But also advocates and pulling in people who, my friend experienced this. How do I support them? How do I help them? And so it's also educating people who this may not be their experience. And so educating folks who have experienced this, educating people who indirectly have this experience. But it's bringing forth that awareness so that we can be this grief smart culture, and we know how to respond and how to support and how to help people. We want everybody to get it and to know what it's like.
Thank you, Brie. Last but not least, want to take it out?
Sure, that's a lot of pressure. Um, I think for me, it's when it comes to kids, there's still so many communities that think that kids don't have a reason to be sad. Kids don't have a reason to be stressed or anxious or even experience grief, right? And so I get it. I think it just normalizes it. It's people, Stacey, I think it was you that mentioned getting someone from your community to share their experience, to normalize it, to make you think like, wait, that could happen to me, that could happen to my child, that could happen to someone I know. Because there is still a lot of mental health stigma, and there's still a lot of communities, especially when it comes to kids, that think that's not my child. That could happen to someone else's child, but my child's okay. And so we really need more of that stories and that normalizing and people coming together, like you said, to really show us that it's every child. It's from the moment they're born. We need to be having these conversations. We can't wait until we're worried or concerned. We have to do it right now.
Yeah, we shouldn't wait until there's crisis, which is often what we do, the reactive piece. And I think what you said so beautifully earlier is having some of these tools in place to help prevent us from getting there, having these conversations, like Parker said, to break these generational things that keep happening in families. Um, and Bree, just everything you shared about how you continue to support young people, and giving them the tools to then turn around and support others. I'm just so grateful that you all joined us today and shared your heart for this work and the work that all of your organizations are doing to make a difference. Um, yeah, from the bottom of my heart, we just thank you. And we hope that today, if you're listening to the conversation, that you feel like it offered you comfort and tools and insight into really how families can grow and heal through all different types of adversities. And so we'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of the Impact Lounge series, Conversations That Connect Us. And in the meantime, we invite you to join the I Get It movement. All you have to do is post on social media sharing what helps you reset or recharge using the hashtag I Get It, and tag your favorite mental health organization or resource and invite a few friends to do the same. We want to flood our feeds with reminders of what support can be found to help us all. And there's just so many incredible resources like you learned about today. Um, Please head over to SixDegrees.org/I Get It, and you can learn more about all of these organizations that we featured today. Get a resource guide of many of the tools that were mentioned, and let's continue to lean in and show the world that we get it. Thank you.